it was becoming quite obstructive, actually. So, um, yeah, we didn't know what was going on. We just thought it was sort of like the general election sort of getting in people's head, because that's what happens when a general election's coming up. But not for a minute did we think that he would go over to Labour.
And there's now the end of what was shaping up to be a solid week for Rishi Sunak and the Tories took a blow last night with the defection of former Minister Dan Poulter, who's left the Conservatives for Labour, claiming he could no longer trust his old party with the NHS. So how's it gone down in Dan Poulter's own backyard? Sam Murray is a Conservative councillor and vice chair of Mr Poulter's now former Conservative Association. Sam, good morning.
Good morning. Hello.
When did you first hear the news that Dan Poulter was no longer going to be a Conservative MP?
Through the media, 2 seconds before the media was calling us.
Interesting. And what did you make of it? Was it a surprise to you?
It was quite a shock, actually. So we suspected that something wasn't quite right with what was going on in the last few months with the Dan Poulter machine, but we wouldn't have guessed for a minute that he would have gone over to Labour, bearing in mind what he said about Labour in the past. So yeah, it has come as quite a shock to all of us.
And you mentioned there you had some suspicion that something was going on with the Dan Poulter machine. What do you mean by that?
It was becoming apparent that there was a reluctance to work with us councillors in North Ipswich, and it was becoming quite obstructive, actually. So, yeah, we didn't know what was going on. We just thought it was sort of like the general election, sort of getting in people's head, because that's what happens when a general election's coming up. But not for a minute did we think that he would go over to Labour.
And there's been some suggestion that he hasn't been turning up to things in the constituency. He's stopped really acting as the MP. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, he is known as the Invisible Man in North Ipswich anyway. His priorities haven't been with Ipswich, and that has been for quite some time, actually. So it's been quite difficult to make a lot of excuses for him. We acknowledge that he has quite a busy second job, but when you commit to turning up to things, it would be nice if you actually turn up. So yeah, it's been a difficult couple of years anyway. But like I say, we didn't expect what was happening, especially when we had people out there in the morning whilst he was doing his interview with Lyric campaigning on his behalf. So it's, there was no appreciation for the toll that would take on the grassroots.
And what has that done to the grassroots party in the local area? Because as you say, there's all this chat about local elections. There's lots of conversation about when a general election is going to happen. You will have people out and about campaigning. Obviously now not campaigning for Dan Poulter, but previously. What's the mood like there?
I think it's we can't get our head around the reasonings why, because there hasn't been any new policies that have come out. This has come out of the blue for us, but we suspect that this has been on the cards for some time. And unfortunately, we have got some great councillors up for election in a few days' time who do not deserve this betrayal. And we talk about, mental health, and he's spoken about not being able to look at colleagues in the eyes. I wish he would have had that compassion for, my close friends who are standing for election under these circumstances now, because that I can't understand how someone could not even speak to us after having a relationship, or so-called relationship, with some of my colleagues for many years.
Sam Murray, Conservative councillor, vice chair of Dan Poulter's now former Conservative Association. Thank you for joining us on the programme this morning. Now, lots of you are getting in touch about what you're hearing already. Dan Poulter's defection, though, is not necessarily getting you overexcited. Adam, do you think this is going to be something that sticks in people's minds, or do you think, as you suggested earlier, maybe it might be overtaken by the locals this week?
Well, I'm trying to think back of the names of MPs who defected previously, and very few of them become household names
Lee
afterwards.
Anderson probably will. Reform.
Well, is he going to get re-elected?
Well, yeah.
I mean, I'm just thinking in that type of a scale, it is a difficult thing. I mean, the one I can think of is Howarth, who became a Labour minister, having been quite a prominent Conservative. But it is a big move, and I think we got a flavour there of the sort of personal feelings which are generated, and the animosity, which can be, the sense of betrayal.
Yeah, fascinatingly, we had two texts come in at exactly the same time. One of them says that Sam Murray, who was just talking to us there, sounds petty because of what she was saying about Dan Poulter. And someone else saying an endangered species, a Tory with a conscience. I don't know whether you're talking about Dan Poulter or about Sam Murray, but It is, I mean, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because if you are an MP thinking about defecting and you do have this huge party machine in your constituency, you can't tell them, but it must feel, I mean, for everyone involved, it must feel awful to know that people are out there campaigning for you while you are thinking about leaving. It's a real fundamental shift, isn't it, to cross the floor of the Commons?
Yes, I think it is. And again, it shows what is sometimes a disconnection certainly in both the Conservative and the Labour parties between the people at Westminster who have one set of preoccupations quite naturally, and the people on the ground working in council elections and going around posting the leaflets who see the things very differently and often much more in tribal terms.
Yeah, keep your thoughts coming in on those. You can WhatsApp us 0333.
So, Prime Minister, just reacting to these NHS statistics, they still show very long waits that you'd hope to eliminate by now, and an A&E target being missed. On you actually not delivering on your NHS promises?
Well, when I became Prime Minister, I said that cutting waiting lists was one of my 5 priorities. And whilst we haven't made as much progress as I would have liked, today's figures show that we are making headway towards that goal. Over the last 5 months, a reduction of around 200,000 in the overall waiting list, which is positive. And if it wasn't for industrial action, an extra 430,000 patients would have been treated. So whilst there's of course a lot more work to do, the plan is working. And more broadly, we've seen the first year-over-year reduction in A&E and ambulance waiting times. We've got record numbers of staff working in the NHS, a long-term workforce plan, and we're sitting here in a new community diagnostic centre that's coming, just demonstrating that we're doing everything we can to get patients the care they need when they need it.
Thank you very much. That's for